Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise of earnings calls to bring you the insights that really matter. Today, we're dissecting the Q1 fiscal year 2026 update from KalVista Pharmaceuticals. Our mission really is to get under the hood of the initial launch of their new therapy, EKTERLY, and figure out what it means for, their strategy and growth going forward.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. A company right at that pivot point, from R&D to actually selling something.
Yeah.
And the market reaction, well, it certainly suggests they like what they're seeing so far, even with the financial transition happening.
Exactly. That strong market signal, despite some, let's say, less than stellar headline numbers and parts, that's what we need to unpack. So let's kick things off with a quick look at the quarter itself. First fiscal quarter ended July 31st, 2025. KalVista reported a GAAP EPS of negative $1.12. GAAP, that's generally accepted accounting principles, the standard way of reporting. And that number, well, it did miss the street consensus, what analysts were expecting by about $0.21. Not ideal on the surface.
Right. Normally an EPS miss like that might get a negative reaction. But the real story here, and it seems like what everyone's focused on, is the revenue. First recorded net product revenue, $1.4 million. And this is all from the U.S. launch of EKTERLY. It's a huge milestone, their first ever product revenue.
It fundamentally changes the narrative, doesn't it? They're not just a maybe someday biotech anymore.
Yeah, it's like the switch is flipped. And you see that reflected elsewhere in the financials, too. It's almost stark. Operating loss was $59 million, net loss $60.1 million.
Right.
But then you look at R&D, research and development, that actually decreased. Dropped to $15.2 million from over $26 million last year. What's that telling you?
What tells you the big spending on clinical trials, the discovery phase, that's winding down. The drug's approved now. And the flip side of that coin, selling, general, and administrative SG&A, that surged, jumped to $44.7 million, way up from $17.6 million year over year. And that, of course, is the investment in actually selling the drug, building the sales force, marketing, patient support. All that commercial infrastructure, it costs money. So it's not just burning cash, it's investing it in the launch. And they seem to have the resources to do that, right? They've got a pretty strong cash position, $191.5 million in cash equivalents and marketable securities as of July 31st. And management says that gives them a runway liquidity well into 2027. That's a decent cushion.
It is, and that's absolutely crucial. It calms nerves during this heavy spending phase. And it probably explains why, despite that EPS miss, the stock saw some strong positive movement in pre-market trading after the announcement. Investors are clearly looking beyond the immediate bottom line and focusing on that early launch data for EKTERLY. They're betting on the future sales potential.
Okay, so that initial revenue, the $1.4 million, it's significant because it's the first. But it's the underlying launch metrics that are really driving the excitement, yeah? Let's really dig into that EKTERLY launch. Because this isn't just another Me Too drug. FDA approved July 7th, first and only oral on-demand therapy for acute HAE attacks, hereditary angioedema, for adults and kids 12 and up. They launched immediately in the U.S., and management used the word extraordinary to describe the response.
And based on the numbers they shared, extraordinary might actually be pretty accurate. Get this, through August 29th, so just, 7 or 8 weeks post-launch, they got 460 U.S. patient start forms. Now, you have to put that in context. There are maybe 8,000 HAE patients total in the U.S., so 460 forms. That's almost 5% of the entire estimated patient population signing up in less than 2 months. That kind of velocity, especially in a rare disease space, is really, really unusual. Suggests a massive unmet need.
Right. And who are these patients? Is it just one specific group? Apparently not. They said demand is broad. People switching from older on-demand therapies like icatibant, fiasestat, patients across different prophylactic treatments, even patients with a high disease burden. It seems to be appealing across the board.
Which screams that the existing options, mostly injectables for on-demand treatment, just weren't cutting it for a lot of people. I mean, think about it. Having an HAE attack is stressful enough without fumbling with an injection, an oral option. That's not just convenience, it's potentially life-changing. That step change they talk about seems real. It really validates the core idea behind EKTERLY. It's not just slightly better, it's fundamentally different.
And the company's infrastructure seems ready to handle this demand. Their sales team has already reached over 72% of all the doctors treating HAE, including, remarkably, 96% of the top 1,000 prescribers, the Tier 1 docs. That's impressive reach. And 253 unique doctors have actually prescribed it already. And maybe even more telling, 38% of those doctors have started multiple patients on EKTERLY. What does that tell you?
That tells me physicians aren't just trying it once, they're seeing it work, or at least seeing the value. and they're comfortable prescribing it again.
Yeah.
Multiple patients per doc so early on that signals real confidence and integration into their practice. It's becoming a tool in their toolbox, not just an experiment.
Okay, so doctors are prescribing it, but then there's the whole access piece, right? Getting the drug into the patient's hands, dealing with insurance. How's that going? They mentioned this quick start program. Sounds important. Basically, patients get the drug immediately, free of charge, as soon as the doctor submits the form. And then KalVista works behind the scenes to sort out the paid access, the medical exceptions, without making the patient wait. And apparently, all 460 of those initial start forms use this quick start.
Which is a really smart strategy. Remove the initial friction, get the patient started, demonstrate the value. The big question then becomes, how quickly do they convert to paid prescriptions? Because formal payer coverage policies, they can take 6 months or more to get established. But encouragingly, KalVista said that they're already seeing some patients get paid access. And they even mentioned seeing first refills on the paid side of things in late August. That's key. Refills mean patients are staying on it and payers are starting to cover it. That's a very positive early signal.
And they expect to get parity access eventually, right? Similar coverage to other HAE drugs.
That's the goal, yeah. They did acknowledge some payers might ask patients to try a generic first, like generic icatibant, step through. But they pointed out something like 80% of HAE patients have probably used a generic injectable before, so proving it didn't work well for them. Maybe injection site reactions, maybe difficulty injecting during an attack that shouldn't be a huge hurdle for most patients wanting the oral option. It seems manageable.
Okay, so the U.S. launch looks strong, but KalVista's thinking bigger than that, right? Global plans.
Oh, absolutely. Europe is moving fast. The drug, called sabatelstat over there, got a thumbs up from the CHMP in July. That's the Scientific Committee for the EU's regulatory agency. A positive CHMP opinion almost always leads to formal approval.
And that final decision from the European Commission, the EC, is expected when?
In October. So very soon. And critically, they kept their orphan drug status in the EU. That means potentially up to 10 years of market exclusivity once approved. Huge competitive advantage.
10 years. Wow. Okay. And outside the EU?
The UK already granted marketing authorization back in July. It's on the orphan register there, too. Launch is planned for the first half of 2026. But they need to get through the ESC assessment first. That's the UK's cost-effectiveness body. Japan looks likely for approval by end of 2025 with a launch partner, KalVista Pharmaceuticals, ready to go in early 2026. And they mentioned Canada and other markets are in the works too. So yeah, definitely a global ambition.
It all paints a picture of this major strategic shift. From R&D focus to commercial focus, we saw it in the financials, R&D down, SG&A way up. It's like watching the company physically retool itself for sale.
Exactly. It's a classic transition for a successful biotech. And it makes sense they didn't give specific revenue or EPS guidance for the full year yet. It's too early. Things are moving too fast. Management's focus right now is pure execution. Nail the launch, get payers on board, secure those global approvals, and that strong cash position buys them the time they need, well into 2027. They also mentioned future reporting will change. We'll start seeing metrics like repeat prescribers, refill rates, maybe product utilization per patient. Those will be the numbers to really watch going forward.
And speaking of numbers, this was interesting. They actually raised their market growth forecast for EKTERLY by 25%. They said it's because they expect branded pricing to be meaningfully higher based on their list price and just current market dynamics. That's pretty bullish, isn't it? What gives them that confidence already?
It suggests the feedback they're getting, the uptake rate, the perceived value of oral versus injectable. It's maybe even stronger than they initially modeled. They believe they can command a premium price and capture significant market share because the drug offers such a clear advantage. The Q&A session during their call added a bit more color, too. They reinforced how the Quick Start program works hand in glove with their hub services to navigate insurance for patients. It's a high-touch approach.
And the patient outreach seems to be working exceptionally well. Over 4,000 people in their database already, mostly patients and caregivers, and clustered around those top doctors.
Yeah, that shows very targeted and effective communication. They also mentioned prescribing is flexible. Doctors are using telehealth, sometimes no visit needed. Patients usually get 2 boxes initially, then refills are often prescribed as needed, PRN. That flexibility is good for adherence.
And critically, safety looks good so far. No new signals beyond the clinical trials.
That's what they reported. No new safety concerns. And they said anecdotal feedback on efficacy, even for scary laryngeal attacks, has been favorable. very reassuring.
One more thing from the Q&A, the launch trajectory. Was it just a big initial burst?
Apparently not. They describe demand growth as fairly linear since the launch started. That suggests it's not just pent-up demand or trial rollovers, but sustained ongoing interest and adoption. That's a healthier sign for long-term growth. Oh, and on the generic step-through, they made it sound pretty straightforward to document why a patient might fail or not tolerate generic icatibant injection issues, site reactions, difficulty using it during an attack, practical stuff.
Okay, so let's pull back. What's the big picture here for investors, for people tracking this? It feels like a company truly at a turning point. And the market's reaction, that positive stock move, despite the EPS miss, it shows investors are buying into the EKTERLY story, right? The long-term potential.
Absolutely. The core innovation, that first oral on-demand HAE treatment, is seen as a genuine step-changing convenience. It addresses a clear unmet need in a market used to injectables. That convenience factor is driving a lot of the bullish sentiment. It could really change how HAE is managed day to day for patients.
So if you're following KalVista, what are the key things to watch in the coming months? Well, obviously that European Commission decision in October, that's huge. Then how those launch metrics evolve each quarter. We need to see those repeat prescribers, the refill rates, the net revenue after discounts, the payer wins.
Exactly. Those KPIs will tell the real story of commercial traction. Also, keep an eye on other regulatory filings and approvals outside the US and Europe, Japan, Canada. And any news on potentially expanding the label, maybe to younger patients or different uses down the line.
Ultimately, it boils down to execution, doesn't it? Can they turn those initial 460 start forms into thousands of loyal, paying customers with consistent refills? And can they replicate this early success globally? That's what will validate the whole transition story.
Precisely. From development stage promise to commercial reality. That's the journey they're on.
Okay, now for our favorite part. Let's shift gears into something a bit wild, but maybe, just maybe, plausible. Our This Is Not Financial Advice segment. Given this extraordinary uptake, 460 starts, almost 5% of the U.S. market in weeks, this feels like it could re-rate significantly, beyond just a normal orphan drug launch. What's your speculative trade idea?
All right, here's the pitch. A European momentum play, coupled with a refill arbitrage. The idea is you go long KalVista shares now. Why now? Because you're anticipating that October EC decision for sebetralstat in Europe. This isn't just another approval. It comes baked in with that 10-year orphan exclusivity. That's a powerful moat the market might not fully appreciate yet in valuation. Then there's the refill arbitrage part.
Okay, explain that. Arbitrage implies a mispricing.
Right. The mispricing, potentially, is in how the market models near-term revenue. Early reported revenue was mostly initial stocking, those first quick start fills perhaps converting. But the real recurring revenue engine kicks in as those patients get onto paid access and start refilling consistently, month after month. That steady recurring stream could dramatically outperform the initial lumpier consensus models, those first paid refills I mentioned. That's the tiny signal of that potentially huge, underappreciated recurring revenue base starting to build. It's an arbitrage against potentially pessimistic near-term models.
Okay, so long the stock now, anticipating the EU catalyst and this underestimated refill dynamic. How do you juice it?
To amplify it, you could consider pairing the long stock position with some short-dated, maybe slightly out-of-the-money call options, specifically options expiring just after that October EC decision. You're targeting a potential double impact, a fundamental reevaluation based on the strong U.S. launch data continuing, plus the concrete catalyst of European approval and exclusivity, a potential 1-2 punch.
So the high SG&A spend doesn't worry you in this scenario?
In this speculative play, no, you view it as necessary investment. They're building the machine to capture what could be, if they're right, a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. If this oral convenience truly redefines the standard of care like they hope, well, then the current models might be way too low. The EPS miss becomes short-term noise. The alpha comes from betting on that long-term adoption curve, fueled by convenience and global expansion, exceeding current expectations. It's a bet on the sheer power of an easier way to manage a tough disease.
A bet on the inertia of convenience, as you put it. Interesting. Okay, definitely not financial advice, but a thought-provoking angle. And that really wraps up our deep dive today on KalVista Pharmaceuticals. What a fascinating story unfolding.
It really is. A major pivot underway, and those early commercial signals are undeniably strong, even with the expected financial adjustments of launching a drug. Definitely one to keep tracking.
We'll certainly be watching those catalysts, the EU decision, the launch KPIs as they come out. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this discussion gave you some valuable context and maybe got you thinking. What other market shifts or innovations might be underappreciated right now? Where else is real change impacting the bottom line?
And just a reminder, everything we discussed today is purely for informational purposes. It is absolutely not financial advice. Always do your own homework before making any investment decisions.
Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.